Singapore and Formula One closed the season with a race that intensifies the drivers' title battle, with only 6 races left to finish the season. And today, Singapore has wrapped up a race that may not have been the most exciting in terms of Grand Prix action, but it leaves the championship completely open, with multiple possibilities in the final rounds of this 2025 season. So ladies and gentlemen, let's wrap up the race weekend with this summary of round number 18 of the Formula One World Championship. Before we begin, as always, we had a few surprises ahead of the start of the race. The Williams cars, which had qualified 12th and 13th, were disqualified from qualifying for rear wing irregularities. They would start from the back in this Grand Prix, but Albon and Gasly would start from the pit lane for changing car setups and thus breaking Parc Fermé, being practically the only penalties we would have in this race. But perhaps the biggest surprise was that George Russell and Mercedes outsmarted McLaren and Red Bull, taking pole position and showing the good performance we saw from them. In the Azerbaijan Grand Prix, Verstappen finished 2nd and Oscar Piastri 3rd, with Norris in 5th. Waiting to see how the race would end and how it would affect the tight World Drivers' Championship after the 62 laps at the Marina Bay circuit were completed. The following night arrived with no surprises in the sky. So all that awaited us was the battle between the contenders fighting for the World Drivers' Championship title. When the cars lined up on the starting grid, the traffic lights would go out. And with that, the Singapore Grand Prix would begin. Russell doesn't let Verstappen take first place from him, even though he started on the red tire. At the back, Piastri tries to pass the Dutchman, but Norris uses this to overtake Antonelli on the inside of turn 1, with Piastri alongside him trying to take the spot. Only that in turn 3, while trying to overtake him, he slightly hits Verstappen. His car moves and with that he hits his teammate, but he ends up capturing 3rd place with minimal damage to his car. Piastri didn't like this move at all and ended up asking the team to give him back the position because Norris had hit him to get past. But race control decided not to take any action on the move, and McLaren also considered it a racing incident, so they ignored his request, with Piastri quite upset, showing his complete frustration over the team radio. This put Lando Norris 3rd at the restart on mediums, while Verstappen was on faster degrading softs. Meanwhile, Russell pulled away with an absolutely blistering pace, and in just a few laps he built a huge gap to Max Verstappen. For his part, Antonelli, who had started in 4th position, had lost his place to Lando Norris and Charles Leclerc, and he ended up stuck behind him, and despite having drag reduction system on this circuit, where it's very difficult to overtake. In the end, the young Italian spent most of this race reading the sponsors on the rear wing of the Monegasque driver's car. The race was clearly going to be stable, with many drag reduction system trains and few overtakes, since Singapore is a track where overtaking is very difficult. We saw early pit stops from Tsunoda, Bearman and Colapinto, but up front, everyone wanted to stay on track since a poor pit stop could leave you stuck in traffic. And McLaren tried to take advantage of this, trying to trick Red Bull into pitting Max Verstappen earlier. And with that, they would put him directly into the traffic of other drivers, coming out behind them. Red Bull avoided the trap and stayed out, only pitting on lap 20. There was already a gap to exit ahead of Alonso and Hajar, avoiding time lost overtaking them. Norris and Russell stayed out longer, hoping the Ferraris could slow Max Verstappen and cost him time. But both Leclerc and Hamilton stopped before Verstappen reached their positions, and even Antonelli also stopped before Max could get to him. The strategy worked perfectly for Red Bull, as the Dutch driver lost no time, trying to overtake both drivers, making Russell pit on lap 25 along with Kimi, and Norris pitted on lap 26 to make their respective stops. Piastri came in a lap later, but he had a slow stop that made him lose even more time than he already had compared to his teammate. Only a few drivers remained on track waiting for a safety car, such as Fernando Alonso, Lewis Williams, and a few others. But that safety car never came. Despite how difficult this circuit is, Alonso stopped in the pits on lap 28 to get rid of the soft tires, but a very slow 9-second stop made him lose time, and now he would have to make up that gap to recover all the positions lost because of the slow stop. starting by overtaking Hadjar, whom he was able to pass, taking advantage of his engine problems to try to move forward as quickly as possible on the track. Up front, Max Verstappen closed in on George Russell. But immediately, Verstappen started complaining that the rear of his car was unmanageable and Lando Norris began to loom large in the mirrors of car number 1. And a lockup from Verstappen with a little scare helped Norris get even closer, getting into drag reduction system range. But because of the shape of the track, it was almost impossible for Norris to overtake him if Verstappen stayed firm and defended well, even though McLaren's pace was superior to the Red Bull E's, as shown in this graphic. The Grand Prix. We had a scare on lap 45 when Hülkenberg braked late to avoid Franco Colapinto and spun the car. But luckily for him, and for many others, the car didn't crash into the barriers and a safety car was avoided. Whether with a safety car or a virtual safety car. Meanwhile, going back to Fernando's recovery on lap 43, he overtook Alex Albon with a beautiful move. And with this, he was virtually back in the points positions, once the drivers who still had to pit made their respective stops. Here, the leader's only worry is eventually having to deal with traffic during the race. Ross managed to pass them all without any problems, and Verstappen and Norris did too, although Norris managed to stay close to the Dutch driver. He stayed so close that even on lap 53 using drag reduction system into turn 7, Verstappen had to defend the inside. To avoid the overtake, Lando Norris managed to get alongside on the outside, but he couldn't complete the move and once again ended up behind the Red Bull Racing driver. That was practically the only clear chance he had to pass him during the entire race. After that, although Norris was within drag reduction system range, passing him was nearly impossible due to the track's characteristics. And somehow this didn't show up in the broadcast. On lap 53, Antonelli made an impressive overtake on Charles Leclerc at turn 16 to take 5th place, in a spectacular way, completely stretching the braking and catching him by surprise. Beyond that, the race had little else to offer. Hamilton went into the pits to put on the soft tire in an attempt to climb positions, and when he came out, he managed to gain a lot of time on his rivals, to the point that Leclerc gave up the position to him. But on that same lap, his brakes failed, and he ended up losing all the progress he had made. He then had to return the position to Leclerc and struggled through every corner on the last lap because he couldn't stop the car. And in the end, this cost him a 5-second penalty when the race finished. This was essentially the last highlight of the Grand Prix, as the final 10 laps just repeated what we'd seen since the race's midpoint. Norris was still chasing Verstappen within drag reduction system range, but unable to overtake him. Although Carlos Sainz was able to overtake Tsunoda and Hadjar to rescue the last point of the race for the Williams team. But when lap 62 arrived, Russell destroyed all his rivals and in a magnificent way achieved victory at the Singapore Grand Prix. George Russell claims his second win of the season, defying predictions with a blistering pace, and a prodigious qualifying lap that gives him his first victory at this circuit, and one more victory for the Silver Arrows in this tough 2025 season. The remaining top 10 at the Singapore Grand Prix. Verstappen finishes second, gaining only a few points on both. McLaren, third place for Lando Norris, who benefited from his aggressiveness at the start, and with that, third place secures the 2025 Formula 1 Constructors' Championship for McLaren. Fourth place for Oscar Piastri, who was quite upset after what happened in turn 3. Antonelli finished 5th after a poor start. Charles Leclerc took 6th. Fernando Alonso finished 7th after a great race. Oliver Berman took 8th with a solid Grand Prix. Lewis Hamilton drops to 9th place after receiving a penalty. And closing out the top 10, Carlos Sainz putting on a great race from the back of the grid. We know what to expect from races in Singapore. Processions where, if there's no chaos, not much really happens, and unfortunately that was the case in this Grand Prix. A pit stop and a few overtakes in the lower midfield group, but things at the front remain stable. That's true, with a bit of excitement from Norris chasing Verstappen, but we all really knew it wasn't going to be more than that, just a simple chase. My rating for this race will be a 6 flat race. What you'd expect on the streets of Singapore, but at least we'll be back to permanent circuits soon. My drivers of the day this time are George Russell for that impressive pace he showed since yesterday with his qualifying lap. Fernando Alonso finished 7th despite a terrible pit stop. And Oliver Behrman, who did well to finish in the points. and with that, tighten the fight that the Haas team has against the Sauber team for 8th place in the constructors' standings. Today's disappointment is, once again, Ferrari. I know they'll likely be the 4th strongest team on most remaining circuits, because the Italian team has already stopped developing this single-seater. But they still didn't accomplish much in this Grand Prix, remaining in 5th and 6th place, well behind the leaders. And when there could have been something when a Ferrari could have at least beaten Antonelli's Mercedes, it ended up being a brake problem for Hamilton, who went from a potential 5th place to finishing 9th. Because of all those track cuts he had to make to survive at the end of the Grand Prix, Ferrari is clearly waiting for this disastrous season to end. But if 2026 doesn't turn out to be better, don't doubt that soon Italian heads will start to roll. And once again, what we know on this channel as the Ferrari cycle will begin. Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes the 2025 Singapore Grand Prix Formula 1 summary. But this is where I ask you, what did you think of the Grand Prix? Did you like it? Were you disappointed? Who were your standout and disappointing drivers in the 2025 Singapore Grand Prix? Let us know all your opinions in the comments section. With nothing more to add, I say goodbye by telling you that if you like this video, give us a thumbs up. Subscribe, enable notifications for new uploads, and share this video. So I invite you to follow us on our Instagram and Twitter accounts, the links to which will be in the description of this video. And we'll see you soon for more content here on your channel, Skyline Racing. Thanks for tuning in, and see you later.